Hello and welcome to the Events Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Taylor, and each week I talk with event professionals about how they plan, promote, and run their events. We help you build your events empire by growing your business around live events, whether you're running small meetups or conferences, trade shows, and concerts. We focus on finding actionable tips that you can use straight away. So I'm recording this on Wednesday, 24th of April. It was Easter weekend here in Europe. Me and the family went down to Austria, to our place. We had like 5 days down there, which was great. It was kind of the end of a ski season. It wasn't, I love skiing and snowboarding, as I talk about on the podcast. And normally Easter weekend is still ski season, but this year Easter came late. So there wasn't any skiing, which is, a little bit disappointing, but it was still cool. We basically went hiking. We dragged the baby up some hills. I'll post some pictures on the website. So it was cool. It was nice. I just love getting in the mountains, getting in the mountain air, getting away from the city a little bit. So it was a really good weekend. And that meant, things slowed down a little bit with work because in Europe, Friday and Monday are holidays. I think most countries and around the world, Monday is a holiday. So that kind of slowed things down, but it just means a busy week this week. And it's great. Lot of activity. I'm actually doing 3 podcast interviews, including a return of Jeff Berwick. I'm going to interview him tonight. If you remember Jeff, he's the founder of Anarchist. He's an Anarchapulco. It's the Anarchist conference in Mexico. It's a pretty interesting story how you even have an anarchist conference, but he's built it up to be a 4,000 person event. It was a really, really interesting interview. He's a really kind of wild guy, really, really sort of charismatic person. So I talked to him again, and that interview is going to go live next week. In terms of this week, I was also another returning guest, David Abrams from Demio. Now, this week I wanted to talk a little bit about webinars, because people don't really realize often that webinars are another way to run events. It's obviously a virtual event as opposed to an in-person event. David co-founded Demio, which is a system I've used, a webinar software, really good online system to run and record webinars and online meetings. And he gets into it, first of all, we talk about the origin story, because for me, it's fascinating. He started this company with no funding. He just bootstrapped it himself and a friend and made this amazing company. So, and straight away, he left college. He never got a job. He went straight into being an entrepreneur. So it's really fascinating how he did this. So the first part of the interview is kind of the origin story and the entrepreneurial story of David. And then the second part, we get into webinars, like how can you run a successful online training event, meeting, conference, whatever ways to keep people engaged. And then secondly, whatever ways to promote it. We talk about how you use social proof and testimonials, how to promote it. So really, really interesting interview, and I hope you all enjoy it. Just to say, please, we're always looking to grow the podcast slow and steady. So if I could ask 2 things from you as a listener. Firstly, please leave us a review in iTunes or whatever podcast app you use. It really means a lot to us. It really helps us get listed in directories and league tables. And so any review you could leave is super helpful. And secondly, if you like the podcast, and I presume hopefully you do if you're still listening, please just tell one person about it. If you can just tell one person, just email them a link, send them a link via WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, direct message in Twitter, whatever. Just send them a link to the podcast, because if we just tell one person, it really helps us get more new listeners, and it really helps us get new guests, and it helps us get lots of new questions. So it helps the overall quality of the interview. And of course, I love feedback. So if you've got any comments, please email me, dan@theeventspodcast.com, dan@theeventspodcast.com. Email me anything good, bad, any guests you'd like to see, any comments on an interview. I read every email and I reply to every single email I get. So finally, this podcast is sponsored by EventsFrame. That's the company I co-founded. Check it out at eventsframe.com. It's an amazing way to sell tickets online, very similar to Eventbrite, but I would say much better and much cheaper. We've got plans starting at just $39 a month. So you can sell all your tickets. You can integrate your Stripe account, your PayPal account, your Braintree account, your bank account. You take all the money directly. We never get the money. We allow you to create amazing ticket pages. You can create custom discounts. You can create like percentage discounts, time limited discounts. And what's great is as your customers apply these discount codes, it updates the screen real time, so you don't have to go to the next screen to see it. So check it out. It's amazing. It's cheap. I know you're going to love it. And if you email me, probably my EventsFrame, dan@eventsframe.com, dan@eventsframe.com. Put the subject line podcast, and I'm going to send you a special secret discount code. And this is going to be a lifetime discount code as well, off the lifetime of your use of EventsFrame. So again, I want to say thanks for listening. I genuinely appreciate every single person who listens to this podcast. And on to the interview with David. The Events Podcast, I'm your host, Dan Taylor. Today, I'm delighted to be talking to David Abrams on the podcast from Tampa, Florida. David is the CEO and I believe co-founder of Demio, which is a webinar tool, really excellent tool for doing online meetings and webinars, which we've used. And he's going to talk a little bit about his entrepreneurial journey, how he came to found the company, and a bit about webinars, which are a whole kind of area of meetings we haven't discussed before. So, David, a huge welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to chat with you and kind of share some stories.
Cool. So, David, I mean, basically, could we kind of start from the beginning as to your entrepreneurial career? Because, like, it's really interesting. I actually, for me, this is interesting because I've done a bit of research, but I don't know the full story about how you founded Demio. I know you had a side project along the way and you were doing webinars for it. So I'm just keen, like, how, kind of taking back to the kind of start of your entrepreneurial career. Like, did you ever have a job or did you go straight into being an entrepreneur?
No, I think for a long time I was searching for what I wanted to do in my life. And I guess the start of this would be, when I was young, my sister was an entrepreneur and I would help her with her entrepreneurial stuff very early. And I saw her, hustle and go out there and do all that stuff. So like in high school, I made music and I tried to sell CDs and I tried to do all that stuff. But then I ended up going to college. And in college, I got a college job and got in the hospitality industry. And coming out of college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do next. I had graduated with like liberal arts, like creative writing and anthropology. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do next? And I really didn't know.
What were you doing in the catering industry? So you mentioned you were doing catering, like you were doing some business at college to do with catering, is that right?
No, hospitality. I was like serving tables and stuff like that.
Oh,
like
right. Okay, you just had a
jobs.
job doing. It sounded very impressive when he said that. I was like, oh, what's his?
No, just the hospitality. Yeah, just serving and like line cook starts and stuff like that. So just like the basic like kind of college job thing that you do to get through college. But there's like, and I see a lot of college kids also having this where like they don't know exactly what to do next. Like what is the next step? And I think I was kind of lost in that same thing. I didn't know where I wanted to go. I wanted to work hard. I never had a problem working hard or going above and beyond and stuff like that. So I took some time. I traveled, like I saved up some money, traveled around Europe, came back and I was like, okay, what I really want and I really understood is I wanted freedom in my life to explore, to see the world, to explore myself and all these things that like you kind of get with freedom. And so when I came back, I was like dead broke. I had to get a loan out from the bank to get this internship. I took an unpaid internship in marketing in Phoenix, Arizona. And I was living on my friend's couch. And I just worked so hard at this company that I ended up getting a job there, worked my way up. We grew like this basically startup over 2 years, became basically the marketing director, kind of working my way, up through this process and just learning a ton. I just used this opportunity to just learn and do as much as I could. I would stay up super late, get up super early, be the first one in the office, just do everything I could to just hustle and gain that experience and exposure. And then after we got to a certain level, I just realized like I had kind of plateaued there and it was time to move on. And like a lot of people, like when you're first starting and you kind of jump out on your own, you basically contract and freelance. So I did that for a while. I freelanced until I built a web agency, this web agency that failed pretty bad. And the reason that it failed is there was no real systems being made. It wasn't really based on employees and it just couldn't scale well. So when I went to create another agency, I did a marketing agency around not webinar funnels, but just funnels in general, marketing campaigns. I brought on a partner who was like connected to a bunch of people. So we were building out funnels before Russell Brunson's, big splash in industry around funnels. So we had to explain to people what a funnel was and like actually do this in older systems.
Let's just a couple of things there. Yeah. So I'm curious, like, why in the beginning? Why didn't you just go and get a job? Like, why did you take this unpaid internship? And what kind of company were you working at there?
Again, because I had the background in hospitality, I didn't have a marketing degree. I had never worked in marketing before, but I wanted to do something. I knew I could pretty much do anything that I worked really hard at. I can just learn it. So I was interested in exploring like the basics of marketing. I always like advertising and marketing and the ideas behind it. So I went in there and I took an internship because I knew I had no experience. I said, you know what, screw it. I'll start at the bottom. I don't even care. And so I literally took it alone just to survive through that because I was like that broke at that time.
Yeah, it's funny. We talked about this before on the podcast. It's kind of a crazy situation in the US. It's getting like that in the UK now as well, where people leave with so much debt. It's tough to really take the risk and start a new business when you've got so much student debt. Which is, when I went to university, I'm lucky and I'm older than you, so it was free. University was completely free in the UK. I mean, it still is in Scotland. actually where I went in Scotland, it still is free, which is cool. And so I had no debt, like I never had to, I wasn't kind of thinking about, like, I just left and started working, and I think it's getting harder and harder as the debt's getting harder for people. And I'm not surprised less, a lot of people are just not going to college at all now, or doing it the cheap way, like doing a couple of years at community college or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, college can get pretty expensive out here. I was lucky. I honestly, to be transparent, I was very lucky because I did get a scholarship. I had good academic scores in high school. So I got a scholarship. So I didn't have a lot of debt. But what I didn't have is a lot of money because I had gone and traveled to Europe. And that's kind of gave me this vision of like freedom in life and all the things that I wanted to do. But because of that, I was like dead broke. So, and I wanted to change. I wanted to do something that pushed myself out of my comfort zone. So, and that's continually what I tell people is like, sometimes you just got to take a risk, like even with business or not business, if you want to have a change, there's going to be risk involved. And so when I got to that second agency, that I realized I had to build it out with systems. So I really
sorry to Dave, I think a lot of people listening to this are not going to know what it was great, but you kind of flew through a lot of things. Like what, like you were building out funnels. Like what does that mean? Because I guess a lot of people aren't going to have no idea what that means. Marketing funnels.
Yeah, that's a great point. So marketing funnels, basically, we were building out both the strategy and the technology to help online companies take or attract leads and convert them into customers. And we would do this through a process that's typically called a web funnel. Yeah. So some type of lead generation device to some relationship nurture building device to some sales mechanism to move them into a customer. Now, this may be like a small upfront price point to then upsell them into a bigger price point and then into something else. Or it could just be, a full-on funnel to a high price point item. So we did a couple of those things. And some of those things were, like you mentioned, webinar funnels or webinar campaigns that we would set up and build for people. So we were creating both the strategy, going in there, talking to these companies, customers, learning about their business, learning about their customer personas, writing the strategy, outlining everything, and then going in there and building graphics, the technology behind it, bringing in the systems and like the email service providers and building these campaigns. And this was like before a lot of these companies had become super advanced like they are now and easier to do. So a lot of this we had to hand build or, it was just very complex and took a lot of time and energy.
Right. And what, was this making money at this point? Were you actually were you making a good living for yourself, or was this kind of just like, getting by? How was it looking for you at this point?
Yeah, the web agency was more like getting by. We had some really good customers and some good months, but because I didn't have good systems, it didn't scale well and it wasn't making me a lot of money. So I shut it down pretty early. This agency actually, because of those lessons that I learned about systems, we brought on good team members early and we were able to scale pretty fast. The price points are pretty high, so we actually made good money in the agency. It was a lot of work though. And what I realized kind of midway through is with agencies, it's always a people scale business, meaning that the more customers we bring in, the more employees we have to bring in. So scale becomes very much determined by the amount of people that you have. And it becomes hard to then scale and keep profit margins high. You kind of always have this like set net profit margin that you can have, and you're kind of scraping off the top after like costs and like employees and stuff like that. And if projects run over, all of a sudden you eat away in these profit margins. So it was very frustrating for me. I was very I love to do it. I love the strategy behind it, but I was frustrated. And during this time was when I started really thinking I want to get into software. I want to get into a business that can scale without 100% the needs of people behind it. And so during this time, I started taking some of that profit that I was making and then funding some smaller software. So I started small with a very simple software that kind of failed, but I learned a lot of lessons on how to hire, what to look for, how to build out documentation, all the things that I needed to do. Built the second one out. That one did better, but it still wasn't a good validated idea. So then I did another one, validated that idea, launched that one, made some good money with it, turned around and sold it, did another one, did that one a little bit better, sold that one early. And then during this time, as I was just gaining knowledge, I was kind of slowly ramping down the agency. So
can I ask, how were you doing these software startups? Because I guess you were kind of like a non-technical or semi-technical, but you weren't building these yourself. Were you?
I was not. No, I was not.
Were you partnering with someone, or were you just hiring someone on Elance or whatever website you were doing? How were you going about doing these SaaS apps?
Yeah, these first ones I did basically taking some of that funding, and I did a very cheap minimum viable product basically. And I would go and I would hire engineers off Upwork. But the lessons of that agency, that kind of marketing agency, had taught me how to hire, how to headhunt, how to find people. So luckily I was able to find good people. I had made some mistakes in these softwares for sure, but every time I tried to make sure I learned from that mistake and bring it into the next kind of hire, the next company that I did. It wasn't actually a company, it was like kind of all under one umbrella. So like the next software that I built out, nothing was anywhere near the project that I'm working on now, but these were all like little stepping stones, each one a stepping stone that increased my knowledge and helped me grow and understand stuff more. So I had to kind of reduce the time in the agency to add more time into the software, but I knew that was my goal. I knew that's where I wanted to go. So I got to this point where it's like I had to make a choice of which direction I wanted to go. And during this time, while I was on these like final softwares and my agency was coming down, Wyatt, my co-founder, and I started talking about Demio. Now, Wyatt had kind of got into the process of building things out already, but when we started talking, there was a lot of overlap on things that he could have help with or like needed help with from the operational side and hiring and the setup of becoming all that stuff that I had then learned a ton about and started excelling in these other companies. And so I actually joined with him in Demio a few months after he started like the ramp up of this project for Demio. And during this time, I just basically sold off the rest of those softwares. I closed out all the accounts on the agency, which, looking back now may have not been the best decision because it did kind of kill also all my like livable salary and income that was coming in. But we just said, hey, let's burn the boats, let's double down. And we went all in on Demio, and that was about 4.5 years ago.
Cool. Now, just to finish off this early stage, how did you very casually said about how you sold all these businesses, which is pretty cool. Like, were you selling them on kind of webs, things like Flipper, or were these bigger sites you were using a broker, or did you just have customers who bought them? How were you selling all these SaaS apps? Like as in selling the company, not selling it to customers.
Yeah, again, these weren't individual like companies. I had done them under an umbrella. I basically created individual contracts with these companies. Now, the best thing that I can say is I tried Flippa for a couple of these. Some of them had no attraction, and some of them I just had to take the loss on. I just like the first two, I just took a loss on and closed them down. Yeah. I was just like, nobody wants them. Sure. They weren't done well. They were lessons. They were failures and lessons, and I'm totally okay with that. The two that I sold, I actually did it from networking groups. That like going to masterminds, networking, creating connections has been my number one kind of advantage there because we would talk about things that they need in their business, and I would bring up, hey, I got this cool software. Now, both of these had either customers or like a really good idea that, again, I had learned from the first ones that I had built. So good validation, kind of good development, kind of a good engineer attached, maybe customers already, maybe revenue already, maybe a lead generation already. But these were sold to companies that had revenue already coming in, they were already funded, and they're just like, oh, that'd be a great addition to my company. So I was able to sell it to them because of the closeness of a connection. If I didn't have that, I probably would never have been able to sell them the way I did or as fast as I did.
Right. That's interesting. So it's cool. So let's carry on. Like, so you started Dem. How did you meet your co-founder, by the way? Is this somebody you worked together with on the agency?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We actually met in Tampa at a networking mastermind at someone's house. There's like a lot of like networking entrepreneurs here in Tampa. Yeah. And he had just moved to Florida from, I believe, Atlanta. He had just taken a jump and moved to Tampa. And this was like kind of his first event that he had gone to. He had just got there. And we kind of hit it off at this event and started hanging out, started working together. And although we never did anything together, we were constantly either working out together or just like talking about our businesses together, just coming up with new ideas and like helping each other out. Yep. Always talked about trying to find ways to work together, kind of like brainstormed ideas on stuff. But it never really happened until he kind of had momentum on what he wanted to do. And then we saw, hey, there really is tangible overlap in skill sets that would go like work well together if we came together.
Right. So you basically, you sold off the other SaaSes and do you have any, and you were full-time just building Demio. And sorry, I missed it. Why did you decide to build like a webinar system? What was the story behind that? Yeah.
So again, that like kind of introductory piece of that kind of came from Wyatt, but the truth of the matter is, for both of us, we were using webinars. For Wyatt, he actually had an SEO info marketing company / agency, and they were using webinars to sell product on the back end of launches, also with just like direct customers. They were selling strategic partnerships and stuff like that. I was in my agency building those campaigns.
Yep.
And the pain point that we both found, and I sometimes would come over to help him in his business build his campaigns, is that it would sometimes take 3 or 4 systems to put together to build out a campaign. It could take me a couple of days. It was an expensive process. People were paying us thousands of dollars to set up these webinar campaigns.
Yep.
And then we had to use a system that felt antiquated and outdated. We were using like GoToWebinar and we hated it. It would freeze on webinars, it would crash for us, and we're like, man, there has to be an easier way to do this stuff. Like it was just so frustrating to build this stuff out. So that is where the actual idea came from. And when we looked into the marketplace for validation, everywhere on social media, everyone was complaining about the webinars, like products that were out there. Like, why can't there be something better? Now, one mistake that we didn't do was go and do a ton of validation and competitive research to see just, how deep that pain went, what the actual needs and stuff were. And if we talk about the journey of Demio, there's plenty of mistakes that we made along the way on like kind of the validation process. But I think we just saw enough to be like, okay, we need to do this. Now, during our build out process, it took us about literally almost 2 years to get our product to beta and to launch, which really sucked. Some platforms came out, like Webinar Jam kind of came out, and a couple other platforms. So newer platforms started to emerge as we were already on the journey. But when we first started, they weren't there.
And how did you fund this 2 years? Like, were you both still doing well, you said you'd got rid of your side business. Was your partner doing side business? Like, did you get any funding, or were you just how were you surviving the 2 years period?
We were totally bootstrapped, and we utilized the funds that we had both saved from his company and from my company. And he did a good amount of investing into the company along the way, which honestly, the major reason we had to invest so much is because of technical hurdles along the way and just the amount of uphill movement we had to do to build out the technical side of this platform.
I mean, 2 years is a lot. That's a long time to get to from kind of launch to actually to release your first product. Like, were you worried it was like such a long time and no one's going to like it? Like, were you pretty scared, when you got into like year 2 of this process?
Here's kind of what happened is we started going through this process, and we actually had a CTO that we brought in from Turkey, and we brought him out to Tampa. We did everything together. And then we were excited to have this agency work with us. And he was going to run everything. And after about 4 or 5 months, it was just disastrous. It was terrible. So we had funded a ton of money into them, but we basically had to scrap everything and start over. I'm just all right, we're building out the team from scratch. So we started doing that. But we also made the mistake of utilizing that CTO's kind of framework of everything that we needed. And by the time we got there, we realized that it was a good product, but it wasn't going to be like the product that people would just drop everything and switch to. And we're like, listen, if we're going to make try to go up against other platforms, we have to do something pretty special. We have to do something that people are like, yes, that solves my pain points and it's a better experience. So we actually had some customers coming in. We got to this quote unquote early beta. We started testing it. It worked. The product was okay. There were bugs and stuff, but we knew that we could build on it. But we had to make one of the toughest decisions of our lives, which was we need to change the core of Demio, the streaming engine itself. We had been built on this older legacy technology that worked really well called RTMP, which is a streaming protocol that works really well. A lot of companies use it, and maybe Skype does, I don't know. But we then switched to WebRTC, which is a new language that was up and coming. Not all the browsers support it yet, and it was what they said was going to be the future of streaming, but it was still very early, what you would call bleeding edge. Yep. So we just made a very hard decision. We closed out all the customers that we had. We basically scratched the internals of what we had, and we restarted to build out on WebRTC. And because it was bleeding edge, it took us a lot of resources and time to test and build and do all the things that we wanted to do, where some of the companies out there were using WebRTC, they just built on top of Google Hangouts. And that actually kind of came back and bit them in the butt later when Google Hangouts deleted itself. But we literally went to the source of WebRTC and started building from there.
Well, do you think part of the reason it all kind of failed with his Turkish CTO is kind of the two of you had a bit of inexperience, is you weren't so technically experienced, and do you think that was obviously you know a lot now, but back then you didn't. So do you think that was part of the reason that you made this wrong decision about platform?
I think it's two things. I think, yes, the technical side, but we could have done a better job, I think, of not going the agency route. If we had just hired really good people to start with, which was our goal, but we kind of had the CTO on early. So we're like, oh, we trusted him. We really just believed in him. But I really truly believe that the people you hire are so critically important. So one, if we went back, we probably would have got a technical co-founder.
Yeah.
Maybe someone in the local area. We built a remote company, so it could have been a remote technical co-founder, or done a better job of hiring our first technical team.
Yeah.
And made that decision much earlier. Now, looking back, do I think that we would have been able to build the WebRTC platform at the first day that we kind of came together? I don't know. I don't know if WebRTC was even ready for the public build out. Like, we may have kind of utilized the timing at the perfect time.
You were maybe lucky just to get in right at the right time with the new kind of technology that was coming in.
Exactly. Now, again, I'm just speculating because I'm looking back. I can't change those mistakes, but definitely if I'm looking back and adding notes for anyone listening, take the time with your first employees, be very, very thoughtful. A technical co-founder can really do a huge addition. It is hard to find technical co-founders. And a lot of times what you want to do is have a very good vision laid out, a really good understanding of who your target customer is, the pain points you're solving for them, how it's going to scale, like all the things that will attract and sell that vision to your technical co-founder, because they're basically trading their time and energy and wisdom and knowledge and all the years of their experience for no upfront capital and risk to join your business and your vision.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Really well put. Now, and how did it go? Like when you finally you launched, like did you get customers right out of the gate, or was it like a slow process to kind of build the company?
So the good thing that we did do is we marketed early with the product, and we did a very long pre-launch. With things taking so long, we had plenty of times to pre-launch. We did like a video show. We called it Inside Demio. We launched on YouTube, and it was like literally we had a camera guy follow us around about how we were building the company and all the things that we were doing. So we got some momentum from that. We were running ads. We were like doing some like good pre-launch stuff. We built a good sized list before Demio beta even came out. Cool. And then we invited those customers to the beta. So we had 1,000 beta people in during our beta launch. And then we turned around and turned that into a quote unquote grand opening where we did 7 days of discounted annual plans. And we were able to bring in 450 customers in that first 7 days. That gave us, some good runway. It gave us life and customers. Now, they weren't the best, the perfect audience that we wanted to build for. Not saying that we didn't want the customers or anything like that, but sometimes going slower in the beginning and working with the right customers can give you better feedback loops and more, ability to scale. But we were kind of in a position where, after waiting so long, we just had to get this product out into the world. So right. We did that launch, and then we had to just go on that slow grind after that and continue building the product. It was still kind of rough and unrefined when we launched, but we were still able to attract customers, keep customers, and grow from there, having good word of mouth along the way.
Cool. Now, and just to give people a bit of view, what sort of size is the company now? I mean, I don't know what you can share about revenue or employees, but what kind of size are you at right now?
Yeah, so right now we have, I believe we just hired our 12th employee this week. So we are growing, and it's only been about 2 years since that launch time.
Cool.
But yeah, I mean, we're still growing month over month, which has been fantastic. We have so much more we want to do. And I think the biggest thing that we've learned is just to slow down. And although we want to do everything, be very, very smart and focused on the priorities. And that's some of the lessons that we learned is instead of just going out and doing everything every customer asks, we prioritize, we do a lot of surveys, we do a lot of feedback on different product focused items to make sure that if we do invest the time and we do it based on what the customers need and want, and we'll add the most impact for the time we put in.
Definitely. That's really interesting. Now, I want to talk a little bit about webinars, David, because we've got a really diverse audience for this podcast, so there's definitely a lot of kind of startup type people who'll be interested in your story so far. But, the common theme is generally people who are doing events and stuff. So obviously webinars, it's in a way, it's a virtual event. A webinar can be a sales item. People even run virtual conferences and things as webinars, which is, I don't know if we'll get onto that hopefully in a bit. But I read an article you wrote somewhere where you actually said about you actually failed a little bit yourself in selling Demio via webinars in the beginning. I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we love to talk about the lessons that we've learned through
Yeah,
failure.
no, they're the best. I mean, there's the thing people always forget, like the people's failures are the most interesting stories that people want to hear, you know, especially if you come out of the other side of it, you know.
Well, I think every lesson is, or every failure is just a lesson. And if you can't learn from it, then it could be a failure. But for us, it's like, we're just going to we're going to move forward. And sometimes we're going to trip, but as long as we learn from it, we're going to keep going.
Sure.
So I think in that regard, what we really learned from webinars is when we first started trying to launch webinars ourselves to sell the platform, we recognized a couple things. One, the audience we were going after, we sometimes weren't selling to the right audience. So that became deeper and easier to find when we looked at revenue metrics inside the company, our lifetime value of specific segments of a customers, our average revenue per user for specific segments of customers. And the more mature your business gets, the more time you get to spend in things like who your customers are, understanding what segments they're in, who your ideal customer would be, the features and functions that would suit them best, maybe the economics behind the company and how you want to sell to them and raise your average revenue per user, all that kind of good stuff. That comes once you kind of get past the survival part of your business. It's like the early days.
Right.
So that was lesson one, was we realized, maybe the avatar, the customer persona we were going after wasn't right. And the other major thing that we really learned was the power of your hook, as I like to call it, or the thing that attracts your registrants and attendees to your event. Like, that is the most critical piece of this. And it would be very similar if you were just having an event offline. Like, you have all these speakers coming, but if you talk about the event in the wrong way and you don't hook the right audience with the right messaging, you're not going to have a very good buy rate. You're not going to have a very good show up rate at that live event, even if you have the best speakers in the world. So really, it takes time to understand your hook. And the hook best comes from your actual customers, their aspirations, their goals, their pain points. What can you do on this event to solve something that would be very helpful for them, or that really piques their interest and curiosity based on their goals and aspirations? And then how do you actually deliver quality content to them in about 45 minutes to an hour? And that was kind of like the lessons that we learned. And that post that you're talking about is on Bear Metrics and on the blog there. And it's a pretty good post. I can't go through it all on the show. It would take me a solid 30 minutes, but it's a really good post if you guys want to read, how we came up with the hooks and what that actually means.
I'll add a link to it, definitely. Now, and I'm curious, what, there's a lot of people listening to this podcast are running different types of events. Some people are running training events. Some people are running just pure sales events to try to sell their product. Some people are running, actual multi-day conferences and things and I'm curious, what's kind of a breakdown of the type of events people are running on Demio? Obviously, sales webinars I presume is a majority, but or you tell me, maybe I'm wrong. What is the kind of breakdown for the kind of things and the range of things people are running on as webinars on your platform?
Yeah, I think it's probably very similar to the type of events people are doing offline. Now, the point of webinars is really that you get people the same personal experience, the same interactive and engaging experience of a live event online, where people don't have to buy travel tickets. They don't have to go somewhere. They can do it from the convenience of their own home or at work or on the go or wherever they are. So you trade convenience, but you keep that engagement, interactivity, and all the relationship building of a live event. Now, honestly, it's not just sales events. We have the big use cases that we have is lead generation events. So people trying to fill their top of funnel, trying to generate new leads for their products and warm them up. Also demand generation. So working through prospects through, an educational seminar or educational webinar, I should say, with maybe polls and feedback questions and all these things that basically can then qualify those prospects better for a sales team to go through and close them on a sale. Onboarding and user activation webinars, a lot of software companies come in and use this for that. Customer engagement, so retention, reducing churn on their products by having maybe live training events at some point every month or every week or something like that. Things that keep customers engaged, brand awareness and partnerships. So a lot of strategic partner webinars that go on, whether there is a sales close at the end or not. Those are also really big use cases on Demio.
And do you have people running training events or even full day or multi-day events, events on Demio as well?
Yeah, so we do see people run multi-webinar conferences and seminars and summits We do see a lot of live training, a lot of people doing like certification classes and stuff like that. So there are all those different use cases around education. We're also thinking maybe even, and this is like, so not even a real 100% idea yet, but we are thinking about possibly doing like Demio summits as well. So you can actually come in and not just have a webinar room, but maybe have a summit and be able to launch your full-on summit through Demio, having a full audience there. So that would probably be more in line with like a big summit where you're doing like an online event. But yeah, definitely people are doing live training through Demio all the time.
Cool. And I should say at this point, quick plug for our software EventsFrame. We've got really good integration with Demio, and you can sell tickets for different types of webinars and have it automatically add the person to the Demio webinar. So check that out as well. Just a quick side point.
No, it's a good point. It's a good integration.
Yeah, I'm really happy with that. The first and only webinar we've got. How like the thing I find with webinars is, maybe it's because I'm an easily distracted person. Like what are some tips for people running webinars to keep people engaged? I'm especially thinking if it's like a longer training event or something. But even a sales, like, how do you stop people not just wandering off or opening it, watching YouTube videos on the side and things? Like, is there anything you've seen, or have you written any blog posts about how you can keep that kind of engagement?
Yeah, we have plenty of information on our blog around that, like different ways to keep your things more interactive. And I would say if you're having a live event, what's stopping people from getting distracted in live time as well? Well, it's typically your interactivity and your engagement, stopping and asking questions, the energy. Is everyone with me? Give me a clap if you're with me, if you're excited by this, right? Things that are like getting the audience out of just like this listen only mode. That's where kind of people go into like,
yep.
The autopilot and kind of stop paying attention. So we did things like bring in polls, interactive polls. So I've seen webinars, people have like 30 polls and they're just consistently launching, keeping people engaged.
Yeah, getting the audience to do something. That's really good. Yeah.
Exactly. I've seen people do contests like, if you can pay attention, and we're going to do like 3 contests, and whoever gets the answers right wins a bonus. I've seen cash contests. I've seen all types of cool stuff, but things that allow the audience to have participation. So we have this really great public chat, polls. You can launch handouts at certain times, little giveaways, those type of things, but also really just like stopping, asking questions, and requesting that audience participation is really key ways to get them involved and part of that process as you train all the way throughout.
Right. Cool. Yeah, that's some really good information. Is there anything else in terms of like how you can, like, anything you can do in advance to convince people that an online kind of experience is going to be as good as? I think in my opinion, like it's different. You can never say it's as good as in person. It's slightly different. It is different. But how can you, like, is there any way, any sales techniques to show people, look, this is as viable an experience as meeting face to face?
Look, I think testimonials and social proof are some of the best things that you can do. So even on your registration pages for these events, you can have quotes of people, of their actual feedback from a webinar being like, this was one of the most valuable hours I've spent all year. This was absolutely an incredible time together. I had so much fun today. Like, those small quotes go so far to helping other people be like, wow, this would be worth an hour of my time. Because whether they're going to an event in person or an event online, they're sacrificing their time to come and listen. So there is a trade of value. So you have to make it worthwhile. And the last thing that you want to do is run an event that they're just like bored to tears, that don't get a lot of value in. So focus on the value aspect of what you're doing. Focus on how you can make them go, wow, that was so worth it. And then utilize that social proof and social accountability to get people excited about coming.
That's a fantastic tip. So I'm going to be tweeting that right after this call. Look, David, that was really fantastic to talk to you. I know we had to keep it to 30 minutes tonight. It's beginning of your day in Tampa. It's the end of my day in Prague. I've got to head back I've got a young child at home, I think I mentioned before, so I've got to get back. But it's a real pleasure to talk. Where can people find you online? What's the best place for them? And I'll add links into the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Come on over to Demio. We have live chat on the site. You guys can write in and say hi to me. Sometimes I'm in the chat. You can even reach out and I'll come into the chat. But check us out at demio.com. You can also find me on Twitter. I think my name is ITS Abrams. It's Abrams. And on Facebook.
Just followed you on Twitter right now. Yeah, got it.
Boom. There you go.
Yeah.
So you can add that in there. We also have a Facebook community called the SaaS Breakthrough Community. You can always join in there too on Facebook.
Great. Well, look, huge thank you. That's really, it's really inspirational that you managed to leave university and you never really had a job. Kind of an internship, which, you went straight into the entrepreneurial thing. I think it's a good lesson for people that the first thing you try probably isn't going to work out. So, you just failed quickly on a few things until you found something that did. So I think it's a really great story. So I want to thanks a lot for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure. I'm glad to just share some of the lessons. And I mean, big takeaway I would say for anyone listening is like, it's okay to take the risk, and it's okay that it doesn't work out as long as you try to find the lessons and you continue moving forward. Don't just give up. Don't think that you're a failure. Just keep moving forward, and you keep trying and just learn from it and get better and better. And that's the only way that you're going to move forward. That's pretty much every entrepreneurial journey.
Definitely. Fantastic. Cheers, David.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Do you want to sell more tickets to your amazing events? EventsFrame event ticketing has been built to minimize the amount of time it takes to buy a ticket. Result, you sell more tickets. Check out eventsframe.com.